Hey guys, Drew back with Drew Does Trucks. I just wanted to cover the installation of these MorRyde storage boxes. Our camper came with regular fold down steps underneath of the camper. Our dealer upgraded them to these MorRyde steps, which fold up, so you can see them deployed here in our toy area. And that leaves these big unsightly areas underneath the camper where the factory steps were, like you can see down here where I've been working. So these have been filled with these big heavy steel steps, probably weigh 40 or 50 pounds each. All right, so to install your MorRyde storage boxes, you will need a drill, and you will need a 3/8 inch drill bit to make the holes for the new bolts. This was a close size to draw out the rivets, but I ended up having to finish them with a 1/2 inch drill bit. So it's good to have an assortment of drill bits that can drill steel. Anytime you're working with power tools, I recommend a sturdy pair of gloves, eyeglasses, and earmuffs. You will probably need a hammer and a chisel. As an alternate to the drill, you can also use a grinder and grind the heads off, but probably one or the other, and then a hammer and a chisel to pound those rivets out. They can be tough, so I recommend a little bit larger hammer than a typical carpenter hammer. When you're installing them, like I said, you will absolutely need a drill. A 3/8 inch drill bit, sharp to drill metal, some WD-40 to lubricate it will make it go a lot easier. And then to install the bolts, you will need a 7/16 and an 11/16 wrench, and you will need a 9/16 and a 7/16 socket. And then you can use a ratchet, or if you have one, you can use a small electric impact. This is just a light duty Milwaukee one that I use for most of these smaller projects. So that is all the tools you will need to get this job done. Pretty minimal. So the first order of business, if you want to install these cool MorRyde step boxes, is to remove the factory steps. And by the way, I'll show you what they look like, because this one's already done. There you go. So that's it. They bolt in place of the steps, and it actually looks pretty good. That one's, I'll show you why it's so hard to get them even here in a second. So these factory steps are held in place with 4 rivets, and you pretty much have to drill those rivets out or cut off the heads. That is definitely the hardest part of the installation, these rivets that bolt these in place. So this is what they look like, and I ended up drilling these ones out. I drilled through the end, and that took probably 15 minutes to drill out. There's 4 per step, so I had 8 total. You'll probably only have 4 for your installation, unless you also have 2 pair of steps. So I just used a sharp drill bit, drilled them out, and used a hammer and a punch. And the 4th one is really hard to get out because the entire weight of the stairs will be resting on it. Once you punch the 4th one out, the stairs will fall down, so be prepared for that. That's going to leave you with something like this. So this one, we just dropped the stairs out of it. So the MorRyde kit is basically 2 of these big L brackets and the box itself and this bag of hardware. And I'm going to show you how that works. So once you get the stairs out of here by punching those rivets out, you have to drill 4 1/2 inch holes, which it's drilling, in my case, you're drilling through double layer steel because this is a double layer bracket. So that took a little bit of effort, but use nice high quality drill bits and take your time and spray it with a little bit of WD-40. Makes it go a lot easier. Hopefully you end up with nice big shavings like this. That's a good indication that you're using the right speed and pressure on your drill. Like I said, when you're drilling metal, just nice and slow, keeps your cutting edge and actually makes you cut faster. This is another one of the drilled out factory rivets. So your box will sit up in, you just measure the height of your box down. The problem is, this is why I said it's hard to get them level. This is bolted to these drop down brackets, and these are bolted to the frame. And if you look, kind of, this isn't mounted evenly against this. So and this is curved. You have nothing straight to go off of in your attempt to get the box straight. The only thing that's really straight is this frame, and there's almost no way to draw a parallel line out this far because you have all these surfaces in between. So you just kind of have to eyeball it, and then there's a little bit of slop in this to kind of try and even it out. The box will mount on top of this. So I chose to mount the box up here my thought was some point in time, I'm gonna cut these brackets off below the box because they no longer do anything. Now you could have mounted it low and then you'd have a little space above it. But as you can see, when that one was folded down, you can't get to them with the steps folded down anyway, no matter how low you mount it. So I figured I'd mount them up, get rid of these unsightly steps. Not all campers have steps this low. It just depends on exactly what fold out steps your camper came with. So once you drill your holes, these come with these nylock nuts. They go on the back side here. They are quite large. Can't remember the wrench size we used. I think it's a step below 3/4. And then these 1/2-inch bolts will go through. You'll tighten them. And I'm going to do that real quick and then I'll show you guys the next step. All right, so the heads of these bolts are 9/16. I recommend using a socket and a ratchet, or if you have one, a small impact like this. I think most people have that by this point in time. If not, they're also great for changing tires if you get a flat. The nuts are quite large. This is an 11/16 for the backside for our nylock nuts. All 4 of these are snugged in place. Before we set our toolbox in there, there's one little thing you have to add. So these are all nylock nuts with the kit, which is nice, except for 2 of these nuts. Now that's how you can tell them apart from the rest. And these are jam nuts. I'll show you what we do with these. All right, so you take your long bolts and you thread your jam nuts on like all the way. And then you have 2 riv nuts located in the top of this. They're kind of a pain to get to and get these bolts started. But you're gonna just thread these in, and it's hard to do with one hand. So I'll show you that in a second. All right, here you can see there's bolts threaded in with the jam nuts on. You just want to thread them until you can fill them at the very end of this. Now we're ready to put our toolboxes in. All right, so now our toolbox is in. The most important consideration for the depth here is that this part of your MorRyde steps are gonna hit right here. So we need to make sure that the toolbox is pushed in far enough that that's not gonna hit your toolbox and prevent the stairs from coming down. In order to do that, you want to make sure it doesn't stick out any further than these brackets. And these bolts that we threaded in here, we're gonna start to tighten them up. And all they do is thread in there and contact the edges of those brackets. As you can see, this one has a long way to go, but you can do that by hand. You just kind of go evenly and tighten those up until they start contacting the edges of those factory drop down brackets. All right, so we have both of these bolts about equal distances out and just barely touching the walls, but this is still loose. So we want to go ahead and drop our, I think this is 7/16 hardware, down through these brackets. So each hole will get a bolt and a washer drop down through into the slotted bracket below. And then once those bolts are on, you'll put a flat washer and a nylock nut on the bottom of each one. All right, so we got all of our bolts in. In order to get them in, I did have to kind of squeeze this a little bit just to free up some slack. That's why we leave these jam nuts loose till we get all of our bolts started in. So we can go ahead and run these bolts all the way in, making sure that this is centered up in there exactly how we want it, because these sort of set how it's centered. These bolts, once tightened, set front to back. And this looks like it's pretty good to me. So once you get these where you want them, just a couple turns of this to run those bolts all the way into the bracket. And then you go ahead and advance those jam nuts, which this one's already down, all the way against that rivet collar. And you just tighten them up about half a turn past hand tight. So again, we'll run that down, do the same thing on this side. And then for the last step, you will need 2 7/16 wrench, or I would recommend a 7/16 wrench and a ratchet and a socket. Again, if you have an impact, this is a great application for it. You'll just have to reach underneath with 1 wrench, tighten these up till they're snug. All right, so with those fasteners tight, you can see the box is not going anywhere. And installation is done. The only thing I don't like about these boxes, there's no latch. The only thing that keeps them closed is the lock. So if you ever want to get in and out of them, you have to use the key. But as you can see, that replaces useless storage space. They're taken up by big clunky stairs with a nice compartment. And the best thing about these, for me, is if you like to use these leveling blocks, which we used to use wood blocks that work just fine. I like these a little better just because they do pack and they're a little more portable. But anyway, fit perfectly right in there. You can fit 2 packs per compartment, and we use 2 packs of those, and they take up a ton of space up in our front luggage compartment. So that gets these completely out. So these should hold 2 Lynx levelers with a wheel chock right in the middle, and that should make setup a lot easier. We can go ahead and immediately pull these out in our wheel chocks when we get on site, and then we're done. So the only thing I might do is change this lock out for one that's just a hand latch, sort of in the style of this one here on our compartment. I may do that, I'm not sure. I'm not really worried about anybody stealing my leveling blocks. But that's it. That is the installation of the MorRyde step above storage boxes. So I really like them. Having just installed them, we'll let you know if that's not the case anymore. But also really like the MorRyde steps. They've been a great upgrade to this trailer.